I unabashedly love Star Wars Visions. I just think it's really cool getting to see what animation studios from other countries can do with Star Wars, because their unique perspectives can help the franchise feel fresh and new and exciting. And even though Volume 3 went back to focusing on short films that were from Japan specifically, that doesn't take away from how unique these shorts actually are. Plus, who doesn't love anime these days? So I was glad that Volume 3 went back to Japan, especially since some studios were given the chance to make a sequel to their original shorts. I may not have liked the dual payback as much as its predecessor, but I still think that it made for a really solid episode. The animation is beautiful, the character designs are incredibly fun, and the story itself is admittedly interesting. I just wish we had more time to flesh out the concepts and the characters in said story. And for an episode about a fallen Jedi hunting down a former Sith, I was surprised by the lighthearted and comical tone of the actual episode. But that doesn't change the fact that this acted as a strong opening for Volume 3. And the next episode, titled The Song of Four Wings, is absolutely incredible. I loved the wonderfully vibrant colors that were on display, the delightful electronic music that played throughout the episode, the creative and exciting action sequences that took place, and even the characters that were featured in this story. Woopas is a particularly memorable character, and is probably the cutest thing to be introduced to Star Wars since Grogu. But I loved learning about Princess Crane and her story as well. Episodes like this remind me of why I love Star Wars Visions so much. I hope this short will end up getting a follow-up in the future. Speaking of follow-ups, The Ninth Jedi: A Child of Hope was not as engaging as I was hoping it would be, which was really disappointing, especially considering how awesome the original short actually was. But A Child of Hope is not a bad story by any means. I just wish that it felt a bit more compelling and impactful. Granted, I'm glad that the story was about overcoming self-doubt and lending a helping hand to anyone in need, but that story merely felt like a footnote in Kara's overarching journey to find her father. But I suppose this was always destined to be the case, especially since The Ninth Jedi is going to become its own series. So we'll probably learn more about Kara's character in that show. The Bounty Hunters is a lot of fun, though. Like some of the best episodes of Star Wars Visions, this short film features some beautiful animation, plenty of memorable characters, an engaging story, and some genuinely exciting action sequences. And since there was an obvious emphasis on bounty hunters here, the episode reminded me of when The Mandalorian used to be awesome. I hope this short will get a sequel in the future. Though Yuko's Treasure is probably my favorite episode of Volume 3. The story, the characters, the designs, and the animation all made for a delightfully entertaining experience. This was a fun action-adventure not unlike The Goonies or even last year's Skeleton Crew. Plus, as much as I do like seeing new Star Wars locations, it was nice to visit a familiar setting like Tatooine. I would definitely love to see a future sequel to this short. The Lost Ones is the first Star Wars Visions sequel that I actually like better than the original. And that's probably because the story stands perfectly on its own 2 feet. It doesn't really connect to the original short at all, at least not to my recollection. Plus, I think F is a really interesting character. She gives really wise advice, she sacrifices herself to help a group of refugees, she doesn't let her former master corrupt her beliefs, she is a proper Jedi. And I hope we get to see her again. And The Smuggler is another fantastic episode. This felt like a classic Star Wars adventure filled with interesting characters, fascinating story details, beautiful animation, and outstanding action sequences. As a matter of fact, these elements were so good that it felt like I was watching an episode that exists in canon. So I really hope that this short will get a follow-up in the future, because this was easily one of my favorite episodes in the series. Unfortunately, it pains me to say that The Bird of Paradise was not one of my favorite episodes, but I still thought it introduced some cool and interesting concepts. I especially loved the visuals here, since the Force was depicted through such a beautiful use of color and animation. The story itself is a bit predictable, but it did feature some resonating themes about identity and self-worth. Plus, George Takei voiced a character in this episode, which was fun, and it made me wish that there was more crossover between Star Wars and Star Trek. Black is not only an incredibly unique episode, but it's also the most experimental piece of Star Wars media ever, which is a good thing. Because while I personally prefer to watch a more straightforward narrative, I admire how avant-garde this episode felt. This is a beautifully animated fever dream unlike anything else I've seen before. Combining trippy visuals with gorgeous backdrops and glimpses of grotesque horror, I can see why this was the short that was nominated for several awards. I don't know what it's really about or if I'll ever watch it again, but I'm glad that it exists, and I hope it'll inspire more experimental Star Wars projects. And that's exactly how I feel about Star Wars Visions as a whole. Because even if it may not be everyone's cup of tea, this series definitely has the ability to inspire future Star Wars stories, which is awesome since Star Wars was originally inspired by samurai tales, Akira Kurosawa films, and other Japanese stories. So Star Wars Visions is kind of like poetry. It rhymes. It brings out the best elements in Star Wars without needing to be bogged down by years worth of canon. And even though I would consider myself to be a huge canon junkie, I personally don't need every project to take place in canon. I love Legends and the LEGO Star Wars specials and the Certain Point of View books just as much as I love anything from canon, and I think this series happens to be better than all of those projects. So whether it expands to other countries or not, I really hope that this show will return for plenty of more seasons, because Star Wars Visions Volume 3 would definitely get a recommendation from me. But be sure to let me know what you thought of this season, and as always, thanks for watching.